Hello, it's Marcus Cattani here. I just want to talk to you about an initiative that I've called Exercise Book Safety, the three tools. And this is really focused on farmers because farmers and the agriculture sector safety performance is one of the top of the league table that Safe Work Australia put out regularly. And it's been like that for quite some time. And so I've been looking into ways in which we can try and make a difference to that performance. In other words, to stop farmers and people in the agriculture sector from being injured or killed at work. Now, it's quite a tricky sector because farmers, particularly small and medium-sized farms, um, are risk takers. So they're, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that they've been brought up, maybe by their parents to drive the tractor as soon as they could touch the pedals. They work by themselves and they don't have a lot of resources, so they have to take risks to run their business. It's just how they operate. Their tasks also are quite high risk, so they do a whole series of things that could cause injuries. And quite often, as with many other small and medium-sized organisations, they haven't invested a great deal into preventing workplace injuries. So those three things, risk-taking, high-risk work, and not done a lot to do with investing in injury performance, lead to some serious injuries and poor safety performance. And this has been investigated, for example, by the West Australian government set up an inquiry in 2002, which led to a report in 2003. It's available on the public domain. Just do a search for WA Government Agriculture Inquiry. And in that report, the inquirer came up with a whole series of quite profound recommendations and observations. But in particular, at the beginning of that report, she talks about two types of organisation in the agriculture industry, and that's of leaders who view safety and injury prevention as a nuisance, that it impacts negatively their profitability and their productivity. And then there's the other group who've said, health and safety, it actually helps my productivity and profitability, and so I'm going to carry on a commitment to preventing injuries. And so you can see it's kind of likely that the people who have done nothing, who avoid health and safety, are those that are having the injuries. And this initiative, the three tools, is all about trying to provide people with a simple solution, the beginnings of an investment in health and safety. At a meeting with the WA inspectors, one of the conversations was around some of the practices of some commercial organisations to try and sell farmers a safety management system or an online safety management database that costs several $1,000s. And the inspector said, you know what, we don't need that. You can just write what we need in an exercise book. So I've been using that idea of using an exercise book to record some of these things as an analogy of how we can keep things simple. So my challenge is that I've come up with these three tools that I think are quite a useful starting point. What I want to do is to customize these so that they use language that is effective for communicating these things to farmers and to small and medium-sized enterprises. farmers have told me that my language is full of jargon and isn't what they need. So, and that's fair enough. One of the things I want to do is to show you what my thoughts are about the three tools, why I think they can work, and then use these ideas and your know-how about how to communicate this to the farmers to come up with a series of tools that we can then use to assist the prevention of injuries. And I think maybe we can then talk to the insurers and other people about how to these tools, how they're going to contribute to the management of risk. So have a look and then come back to me. Let me know what you think so that I can then share it with others and maybe the financial people to see if we can contribute. They can come on board too, and to assist with the improvements in risk, but then also in people's premiums or the costs of various financial tools, because those organizations have said to me they're interested. Okay, so that was the intro. Let's go a little bit through these three tools. First of all, with a bit of background to show how they map to the various issues. So first of all, let's think about our level of risk over time. So we've got a graph of risk over time. So along the bottom here is time, and then we've got risk up here. So high risk and low risk in the past and in the future. So here this star represents an event. And so the event is something that we don't want to happen again. It's an injury, maybe even a fatality. Simply placing that star on the chart indicates to us that there's something we don't want to happen again. So maybe there's been an increasing level of risk over some time that's led to this event, and we've gone, and then bang, something's happened, and we say we don't want that to happen again. That indicates to us that we need to make a change. So one of the things that health and safety is all about is understanding our level of performance and how that relates to our desired future performance. And we set a series of criteria to help us understand where we are at the moment and where we need to go. So already then we know that we want to reduce our level of risk from that star down to this first red line, which is our toleration of risk. And then in the future, we're going to set another level of risk, which is our acceptable level of risk. So over a series of time, we're going to move the organization from that star through the toleration and to the acceptable. Now, let's have a think about being proactive. So maybe we've noticed that the level of risk is increasing. Maybe there's been a few near misses. Maybe there's been some reviews, or people just saying, oh, if we carry on like this, something's going to go wrong. People understand. So then we could say, well, to stop that increasing anymore, we can set our tolerated level at the point at which someone has identified it, and then we can make sure it doesn't continue to increase. So we do something about it. And again, we'll set an acceptable level of risk for the future. So as I said, what we're going to do is we're going to then assist the organization move from the level of risk today through our level of risk to tolerated, and then when we achieve that tolerated level of risk, we set a new tolerated level of risk and we work our way through it towards this acceptable level of risk in the future. And these gaps are what risk management is all about, is understanding where we are now versus our risk criteria, and we work towards our acceptable level of risk in the future. So how do we do that? Well, the way we do that is that we have a look at what we need to do to improve. So we've had our trigger event, our injury, and we know that we want to come down to a level of risk, an acceptable level of risk in the future. So the health and safety people, or the people that are assisting that, need to come up with a series of actions. These actions address this area under the curve. They're the thing that is supporting this trigger event. But we need to be very careful that as we're developing these actions, we're also doing it in association with the people who've got to implement it in the future. These are the sustaining actions. So as you can see, if we say that our trigger level is here, initially there's not going to be a great deal of sustaining actions, but then as we move and our performance improves, our sustaining actions are going to increase, because we need to now address all of these actions that have been given to us over a period of time. So in other words, our work can get harder and harder unless we're clever and we make sure that we have this interaction between the people designing our improvement actions and the people who've got to implement it. That partnership is critical to make sure that we improve the performance, but not burden people with too much work. The way that we do all of this is, if we've had an incident, then we analyze why that incident has occurred and we do an investigation. We understand, but our investigation tells us what the contributing factors were for that incident, and then we can come up with some actions to address those contributing factors. And then we monitor how those actions have been implemented, and we can get some understanding about the likelihood of that trigger event being repeated in the future. So the three tools are mapped to the various parts of this diagram. So, for example, at the beginning, we spoke about the inherent risk. So that is what could go wrong in the organization. If we carry on up that pathway, we're going to hit this star, this trigger event. So our inherent risk, our what could go wrong, is mapped to a risk register. So we write down the things that could go wrong with a particular task and what should we do about it. We get some leadership commitment to put in place some controls to prevent those potentials from actually happening. Then if the incident does occur, then we could say, well, we're going to investigate that incident. And so we do an investigation. What should we do to prevent recurrence? And then those actions fit into an action management process, such as a shopping list, I've called it, to keep it simple. So these three tools are actually quite useful because they help us understand all of the different parts of this process, of this flow from unacceptable risk down through to toleration of risk. So what could they look like? Well, what I would like you to let me know is, how can we make these look and act as more effective? So a risk register, maybe it would start off with telling us what the scope of the task is that people are doing that could cause harm, and then we write down what could go wrong. So what's the experience of the task? What are the issues that people have had with that task? Then why would it go wrong? So let's have a think about the causes, the contributing factors to it going wrong, and then how are we going to stop it going wrong? So what do we need to do? Do we need to provide some training or provide a proper tool for that task to make sure that this potential that we identified here doesn't actually happen? That will take a bit of leadership commitment, which is a key to preventing injuries. But then if we do have an injury or an incident, we can do an investigation. And there's all sorts of ways of doing investigations, but one of the simplest is called 5 whys. Well, I didn't have the space or the graphic design skills to create 5 whys, so I've given us 4 whys. And basically you say, why did that happen? And then the answer to question 1 is put into question 2. So why did that happen? And so on. We do the same with question 3 and question 4. And at the end of the day, you normally takes 3 or 5 whys to work out those contributing factors that we need to know about what caused that injury or that incident. So the 5 whys is a really straightforward way of working out why an incident occurred. And then from that, we're going to create some actions. So from the risk register, from that leadership commitment, from the effectiveness of those controls, from the incident investigation, we write down in our shopping list the sort of things that we need to do to prevent harm. So what do we need to do? Who's going to do it? When's it going to be done by? And then our progress towards achieving those. Help us monitor the effectiveness of those controls and stop them being forgotten. So, in summary then, what I want to be able to do is engage with farmers on a process that's really easy, that can be written down in an exercise book using these 3 simple templates of the 3 tools. So a risk register, instant investigation, and action management. And I want to turn them into something that is in the terminology that farmers will use. So instead of an action management system, let's call it a shopping list. Instead of a instant investigation, let's call it the 5 whys. Instead of a risk register, it's what could go wrong. Try and keep them in terminology that people will use. So let me know your thoughts and how we can improve these to be something that people will actually use. Thanks.